Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. I will not take up much of your time as I am resolutely the least interesting person who will be on stage tonight. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is here in Treaty 1 territory. That is, of course, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Innuak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are gathered here tonight to celebrate the launch of Real Ones, the new novel from the incredible Katherena Vermette. Huge thanks to Hamish Hamilton and Kingwood Random House of Canada for publishing this book, and to all of you for joining us here to celebrate its launch, both here in person and, of course, virtually. Real Ones tells the story of two Michif sisters who must face their past trauma when their mother is called out for false claims to Indigenous identity. It has topped the bestseller list from the very moment it hit our shelves and been praised by Michelle Good, Michelle Porter, Chantel Fiola, and many other authorities much greater than me, although I can verify it's a really good book. It also came incredibly, almost shockingly quickly after her final book, and we are never going to be surprised, or we're never upset to be surprised by a Katherena Vermette book suddenly descending from the skies toward us, so we're thrilled to have this on our shelves and have all of you here gathered to celebrate its launch. This is further evidence of Vermette's ability to weave a story thoughtfully and brilliantly with great empathy, intelligence, humor, and heart. We're lucky to have her writing in general, and it's a particularly special gift that she brings our city to life in her works. We're also quite chuffed to have the one and only Shelagh Rogers here tonight to lead us through the night. Following that, as you may have gathered from my frantic announcements while running back and forth, there will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout the evening. So if a question does occur to you, and we do ask that it please be limited to questions, that you raise your hand and I will walk over in a non-threatening fashion to you with this microphone. This is not because we don't think you can project. You have very loud voices. It just ensures that those watching at home can hear your questions. I will just interject for one moment. Please do not stand on the stairs, just because it's not safe. Thank you all so much. So now, although it seems entirely superfluous, because I'm sure you have a bit of an idea who tonight's guests are, I will introduce our special guests. Your host, Shelagh Rogers, had a career at CBC Radio that spanned centuries. She hosted current affairs programs for decades. She did write this. She scares me, so I would not make up any of this. But for her last lap, she co-produced The Next Chapter, a program devoted to writing in the land that is called Canada. Over the course of The Next Chapter, she was honored to speak with Katherena Vermette, starting with her novel To Break, which knocked her out. That voice, strong and full of love and heart-shattering. Sheila got to present Kate with the Amazon Canada First Novel Award for The Break and found it hard not to jump up and down when the envelope was opened and hug the toothpaste out of her. Sheila has interviewed Kate for her subsequent novels and could not be happier to be here this evening, speaking to her about her 5-day-old novel, Real Ones. Our guest of honor this evening, Katherena Vermette, is a Michif, Red River Métis writer from Treaty 1 territory, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Her first book, North End Love Songs, published by the Muses Company, won the Governor General's Literary Award for Poetry. Her novels The Break, House of Nancy, The Strangers in the Circle, Hamish Hamilton were all national bestsellers and won multiple literary awards. Her work for children and young adults includes the picture book The Girl and the Wolf, published by Métis, and the graphic novel series A Girl Called Echo, published by Highwater. She holds a Master of Fine Arts from the University of British Columbia and an Honorary Doctor of Letters from the University of Manitoba. Katherena lives with her kids, fur and human, in a cranky old house within skipping distance of the temperamental Red River. Please make an inappropriate amount of noise for Katherena Vermette.
this. I always make it, this reminds me of the romper room. It's like, hey, it's you. Hey, it's you. Thank you for coming, everyone. I do want to, first of all, kind of do a little momming in the room. There are some elders in the back who might need a seat. So if anyone has anyone need a seat and want to come forward, anyone want to like give it up, there is the seat up here up front because David Robertson is a no-show. Let that be known. Bugs me for a seat and then doesn't even show up. Yeah. That one, you're David Robertson today.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I meant to go. I'm all frazzled. I'm walking in. I got stuck in the crowd, didn't want to interrupt. John, thank you so much. Thank you so much, John, and everyone from McNally. Always such a pleasure to be here. Everyone good? We got one chair up here. Oh, there's two right up front. Oh, there's two right there. Okay, we got some chairs up here if anyone needs a chair. I'm gonna talk for a while. We're not gonna get started. We're gonna be slow today. We're already late. It's great. I first of all want to thank everyone at McNally. Thank all of you for coming. So many auspicious things happening around the world today, every day. But thank you for choosing me over Camilla and that other guy. As we go forward, if anyone gets the juicy highlight reels and wants to share, I really just want to hear all her zingers, as I'm sure she'll have zingers, but also too, we're today is the candlelight vigil for our Grand Chief who passed suddenly on Friday. I just I wasn't able to be there, but tomorrow she has the honor of being, her body is going to be held in state at the legislature. So if you're moved to and are able to, you can go see her there. Such a brilliant honor for a beautiful person. In preparing for today, my friend sent me a note. My friend, I'm going to totally name drop here. My friend, the author Andrea Curry, who will be here later this month, September 29th, debuting her novel, or her book, Finding Otipi Misiwak, and I'll be hosting that, and it's a beautiful book, so I encourage you to get it. But this is a quote from Grand Chief, and she said, "I'm not interested in decolonizing Western systems. I'm interested in strengthening Indigenous ones." And I really like that because I'm thinking a lot these days about how to move in and out of systems and how we work in these systems, some of which we do not agree with in the slightest. And particularly in around the Giller controversy, which is happening. I don't know how else to say it. I feel like I have the wrong words around it. But my book, along with 11 others, was honored to be on the long list for the Giller, and the Giller has received funding from Scotiabank, which gives funding to arms dealers. I don't want to shy away from this as a conversation. I have yet to decide what I really want to do with this. I, along with the world, is again mourning another catastrophe and atrocity, and the many atrocities that are happening in Gaza. Last night there was another attack, and the number is nearly 41,000 people. So in saying that, that's kind of where I don't know that I'm the person to speak of this issue. And part of what I wanted to do in our question answer period is I'm open to answering any questions we have. I'm open to constantly continuing the dialogue because I don't think shutting down the conversation is ever the answer. But also I want to give space wherever I can to those who know more about this than me, because those are the folks we should be listening to. Yes, so many things going on in the world. I also make jokes, sarcastic and otherwise, just to abate my own awkwardness and discomfort. So awful segue. Hey, I wrote a book. It's called Real Ones. This art, by the way, is Julie Flett. We commissioned. It's always a pleasure to work with Julie. I think she's a real one. See what I did there? So I'm gonna read very quickly. I'm so excited that Sheila is able to be here. I'm so excited to talk with her about this. I will read, am I adjusted? Chiropractic. I am challenged. I'm gonna read just from the first chapter, the first beginning, no preamble needed, a very quick reading, and then we're gonna get to Sheila's obviously very brilliant questions. So you need to know nothing because it's the beginning of the book. And this is the voice of Lynn. There are many ways to make a clay vessel. Lately, I've been making pinch pot style. Deceptively simple, pinch pots are made from balls of clay, dented in the middle by a thumb or finger, then shaped around and around until the sides flatten and it starts to resemble something like a bowl. They can be small or large, but I keep mine contained to my hand, so relatively small. I smooth and wet the clay over and delicately over again, so many times. Cracks are pushed together, edges pinched. Sometimes I use rocks or shells or bones to carve, form, add, decorate. It's methodical work that requires mindfulness and constant return to presentness. I think most, if not all, definitely all, art does. I'm working on a series of vessels like this, small bowls made in the ways of our ancestors, the very old people who we don't even have names for. We don't know what they called themselves, but they are still here. We are them. So much about North America's original peoples has been forcibly silenced. Nothing new there. But they wrote messages for us in the earth, with the earth. Teachings we can learn from, dig up, find them, and in them ourselves. Things like how to make a small clay bowl. Something so everyday, but sacred at the same time. Ancient folks made many kinds of vessels like these in different, various shapes and sizes. They held water, were cooking pots, held all sorts of food within. In a pinch, they could also be used to place harvested plants, grains, seeds, something for a child to play with. The clay is made from the earth itself, right here at our feet, usually from riverbanks or wet marshy places, formed and then fired, and then when done with, buried back into the earth, returned. That is where we find them now. That is where our teachings literally lie, what I am trying to recreate. I'm learning as much as I can from an archaeologist at the museum, from elders, the internet, stitching knowledges back together, weaving some small part of all they knew, all they would have wanted us to know. It is healing. It is not without healing. It is healing a part of myself that was broken before I was even born. I'm still working on all the parts that got ripped off after.
You're about to be adjusted again.
I'm gonna be adjusted. Oh,
While
look at
you're
these
being
chairs.
adjusted,
While I'm being adjusted, look at these chairs.
they're great.
They're like thrones.
Well, before we even begin, your t-shirt is marvelous,
Isn't this
right?
great?
And can you tell us a little bit
Keep
about
trying
it?
myself. This is, and I didn't even tell her I was wearing it, so this will be a surprise to her. This is a artist, community facilitator, teacher from LRI, Louisville Institute, called Susan Kirkness, and she designed this shirt. She designed it in response to, I don't know, those of us who follow the MMF will remember this. At one time, a few years ago, David Chartrand said we were a Catholic people and we didn't practice ceremony at all. And of course, That was not true. And in response to that, Susan designed this infinity symbol, which we really like as Michif people, right? And just threw a whole bunch of medicines on it. So I love it.
It's
I love
beautiful,
it.
and I thought we should explain it because I know you're gonna be touching your t-shirt through our conversation.
It's all G-rated. It's all G-rated.
That's right. Where, or maybe even when did Real Ones begin for you?
It came from a bunch of different places. I mean, kind of where novels do. I tend to write a whole bunch of different things all at once. I don't like writing one thing. I get very bored very easily. So it was kind of in between the other books, which have a very different vein. It was kind of in between all the race shifting controversies that we all know and love, that we got to all watch in real time unfold. And it started like I'm not on social media. I don't have, my rants are in my journals and kind of illegible. So I was, and that's not a judgment call by any means. It's just that I don't know what I'm thinking until I have to think about it over and over again. So it kind of started like that, kind of as a meditation for that. And then it became about these two voices in my head. There's no way to talk about this without sounding a little bit psychotic. Because no, it's just the different parts of myself that are constantly fighting about the June of me, who is June, the character in the novel, is a Métis studies professor. She's very type A, she's very anxious. She's very like, we must do something all the time. And then there's Lynn, who's the artist who makes the clay vessel. She's the depressive artist. She doesn't want to do anything. She's very listless. She's rotting, as the young kids say, rotting on the couch. I learned that recently. I'm like, yeah, I rot all the time. Just rotting away.
Shedding now.
Shedding. I don't know any of the other lingo, otherwise I'd throw it all down. She's a depressive. She's an artist. She's constantly meditating and thinking and processing and cycling and spiraling, but avoiding, which is also me. So it was kind of a conversation between those two parts about all the things that make up our identity, all the many, many things.
What do you think of the word pretendian?
I like it. I like it. I like made up words. They're all made up, really. And I wanted to choose an accessible word because I don't use the term race shifting anywhere. I use pretendian because it's kind of like, it just puts a label on things. And we can define that or not define that. And I don't know who said it first, how it got like whatever, and where the lingo picked up, but
Pretend Indian.
Pretend Indian. Like it's one of those really, yeah, it's a good word. Yeah, let's bring it out.
And there, more than a few years ago, there was that gross contest for the most cultural appropriation in the story.
Yep.
And then
the appropriation prize.
The appropriation prize, which incidentally then led to the Indigenous Voices Awards.
Yes.
As a nice counter to it. But then there became a lot of pretendians in many different fields. I'm not going to name names, but literary and visual arts and film and academia and so on. But this isn't new, eh?
It is not new. It has been happening forever, since Contact, arguably. I always forget to look up his name. Phil Deloria wrote a book in the 90s called Playing Indian. Yeah. I might be getting his name wrong. Excellent book. Just about how it's always been happening. It's this, and if you look, I follow a lot of like BIPOC yoga folk. And they all talk about the idea of cultural appropriation being the dog whistle to all of the other, colonized processes that happen. Keep adjusting me, I feel so judged. Damn. But no, it is that actual, taking culture as something to consume and adorn, like a costume. Something that you can take away and then teach back to folks. It's literally taking our precious things that make up our culture and our parts of our identity and selling them back to us and teaching us, you know, and that's ironically happened to me quite a few times in my life of non-Indigenous folks posing as Indigenous folks, teaching me back my culture. And it's a violence. It is nothing short of violence.
When you find that someone has been acting Indian, playing Indian, what does it do to you, Kate?
And that's the crux of what I wanted to talk about, because I don't want to call anyone out. I don't want to gossip publicly. Secret.
Afterwards, though.
Afterwards, if you got anything. But every case is different, and every case is very individualized based on a myriad of things and systems that have created these situations where this is possible. But for me, it's always that reflexive idea of if someone is learning my culture and teaching it back to me, and I don't know, what does that say about me and my cultural identity? Like, I've always felt very confident in my Michifness. My father and my uncles and even my grandfather, way back in the 30s, when it was actually very unsafe to be proudly Michif. He was proudly Michif in St. Boniface and a member of several organizations. So I feel like I've always grown up with this history. You know, all their stories my uncles told me about, you know, the racism that they encountered and all the, you know, their BS heroics that were untruths, but, you know, the racism was real. But you know, I always felt confident in that. But when other people come and take that away from you, it's always that. It's very easy for us, I think, as Michif people, and I won't speak for other Indigenous nations, because as a Michif person, it's very easy for us, I feel, to feel wobbly on that identity area. And I know we've talked about this before, that whole, like, am I enough?
Yeah.
Am I enough of something? Am I, you know, do I look Indigenous enough? Do I sound Indigenous enough? Am I, you know, I don't know my language. Oh my gosh, I am totally not, you know, I always call myself a bad Michif person because I don't know Michif. I don't know the language. I don't even know French. Like, I'm bad, you know, and I say it in jest, but it's also those little things that you take and kind of chip away at who you think you are.
What sets everything in motion is that the mom of Lynn and June is outed as a pretendian. She's a star of the visual arts scene in Canada, kind of reinventing the woodland school. And she claims she is Métis, Michif. And she will say, yes, she justifies it by saying, well, I was married to a Métis man, which was what, Métis by injection, maybe? Or something like that.
I had a little bit of Indian in me, so.
Okay, or Métis adjacent. That's a good way to put it. But what does it do to Lynn and June? Now they know that she has been faking it, right?
They know, and it becomes about, I wanted to create a situation, and like I said, all of these pretendian situations are different. I wanted to create a situation that was undeniable. It's undeniable that, and it's a very direct relationship. This is a white person, an artist who's literally poaching the stories, mining the stories from her own family. So it's a very direct line. You know, and so often these stories are muddled in like, oh, maybe this and a little bit that, and like, you know, who knows? And I didn't want it to be a question of what she was doing. She's doing something. And I think so often when we cut away all the questioning parts, it's a very simple idea, right? So Lynn and June just spiral in their own little ways, you know. It becomes about Lynn, the depressive one, you know, goes and hides away, which I'm very guilty of. And then June, the anxious one, you know, spirals in her own little anxious way, which I'm also guilty of, strangely. And really just trying to grapple with what it's doing to their identity, because also this is their mother. So it becomes about all the other ways we identify, you know, not only culturally, it becomes about like how we're built, like what the emotional building blocks, and it becomes about their very personal relationship with their mother, as along with this cultural relationship they now have with this person who's stealing their identity. So it's kind of just about how so it became, I was really playing with that idea of OTP Misiwak, which is one of the names of the Michif people, who translates to the people who own themselves. So it became about them owning themselves, owning their shit, owning their identity, owning how they are built, owning their insecurities, and owning what made them unsure. So kind of all of that mulled together, because I, you know, can never do one thing, it has to match, right?
Her name is Renee,
Yes.
but her Métis name is, over to you, Kate.
Raven Bear Claw.
Raven Bear.
Raven Bear Claw. Raven Bear Claw. I don't know why Raven Bear Claw came to me. Renee's been around for a while. Renee was actually in The Strangers. She played a bit part in The Strangers because she's, and this is not important to the story in any way. My interconnected novels are all standalone. I just make Easter eggs because it's for my own enjoyment. Because this is what makes me entertained. So Renee was married to Jerome. So anyone who's read The Strangers, Jerome was Joseph's son. So Joseph and Jeannie, Joseph was the one who died. His son Jerome married Renee. And so Renee's scene in The Strangers was at Angelique's funeral, so the grandmother's funeral. And she kind of came in looking like an Indian and everyone was kind of laughing at her. So that was kind of like the little introduction to this bigger story, which you don't have to read. Please tell everyone on Goodreads, like, who's like, oh, I didn't get that. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just really like doing, I read a lot of fantasy and we always kind of connect things. It's fun for me. It's not important, I swear.
Mystery novelists bring back characters.
Yeah.
David Robertson brings back characters.
Yeah. Richard Van Camp makes entire communities.
That's right, absolutely.
You know, and like, yeah, I don't get half his Easter eggs, because I don't need to.
But you've got Grandma Jeannie.
Grandma Jeannie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she's marvelous. She's a wonderful character. What is your relationship with grandmothers?
Gosh, you had all the questions. I feel like Oprah
It's
here.
only the beginning.
It's only the beginning. I'm always fascinated. I write a lot of grandmothers. I write a lot of mothers. I write a lot of mothers not only because I am a daughter, but also because I'm a mother, and I can see these things. And all the horrible mothers I write is a kind of a future telling thing sometimes. But it's always those you play with that relationship. I can't wait to be in that grandmother elder role. I've had a lot of fascinating and beautiful grandmothers. That's not to say my children need to go making any babies or anything like that. That's not what I mean. I can totally go adopt children off the street, I'm fine. But I'm not really gonna do that, sorry. But that elderhood is so rich with humor and knowledge and just like good times. And I had my grandmother, I lost one when I was 13 and one when I was 21. So as much as I love them dearly, I feel like that I was so ripped off with having known them. So I kind of adopt grandmothers as I go in the world, but so I have a few now.
So there's elderhood, right? There's parenthood, there's sisterhood, there's motherhood. There are a lot of hoods.
So many, all the hoods,
All
we're hanging
the
in,
hoods
we're
are in the
still
novel.
hanging in the hood.
But I think about Renee, and I'm as terrible a thing as she has done, she feels young to me. She feels like she never grew up or something like that. What were you curious about with Renee?
I was curious about a lot of things. It started with this idea of what makes someone do that. And then it ceases to be about one thing, right? It ceases to be about this one persona that she's identified with for, maybe 5 to 10 years of her life. She has a whole life. She's like a 60-something-year-old woman. No, maybe she's in her 50s because she was a really young mom. But it's her whole life, and something led up to that point. So it became, in part, it became armchair psychologist. You know, I've got to figure out the machinations of her personality and what attachment wounds have led her to these decisions. And obviously, and it became a play around the idea of immaturity. And those of us who became parents at a young age, we were immature. You know, some of us more than others. But it's that idea of interrupted growth. And when we're interrupted and having to be an adult from a very young age, we're still, as much as we're an adult, as much as we're even 50-something-year-old adults, we're still children. We're still like developmentally delayed in some way. And I wanted to kind of, and Renee, to me, as she was growing in her characterization and as her history kind of felt like it unfolded, she became someone totally interrupted. You know, it's this greed that had brought her to her decisions. It's this, I'm not getting enough, so I can totally take this. And almost like, and I know in my younger years, I was definitely guilty of this idea, like, I don't have enough. You have plenty. I can totally take from you. And that, you know, you won't even miss it kind of thing. And it's that kind of idea that I think gives people access to something like claiming a culture that is not their own, and kind of because they feel like they're at a loss of their own personal persona or, you know, cultural stories or ancestry. You know, they don't think they're special enough, so they have to make it up.
Why doesn't she think that? Because she does have a rich cultural background,
She
right? Mennonite, Quebecois.
Yeah.
Yeah, why isn't it enough for her?
I don't know, therein lies the question, you know, and I often feel like that whenever these cases come out. And again, I don't want to name any names, but it's always, what saddens me about that is when you get this person who becomes, you know, outed in this way and everyone feels betrayed by them, what we've lost in what they've done is probably a really fucking great ally that they cannot be because they're trying to be something else that they're not.
Yeah.
So they're missing their own stories, and we all come from stories. We all come from culture. We all have something brilliant in our backgrounds or something mysterious, or, you know, and like all of these, you know, quote unquote white cultures have incredible mythologies and histories and, you know, all of the things that people seem to claim from other cultures.
Imagine putting that energy into allyship.
Yeah.
Right? That's amazing.
That would have been amazing. And I think of that, and again, I keep saying this, I'm not gonna name any names, please, no one sue me. But no, and that's honestly what I think is a desperate tragedy that happens in all of these, because it's folks that are now no longer taken seriously, and we've lost what could have been a great ally.
Yeah. There is healing throughout the novel, and art is part of it. And you read so beautifully about the pots and how Lynn makes her pots. What is the connection between art and healing?
I think, and Lynn kind of explores that a bit, and that's another, you know, exploration. Chris was saying, like, it felt, Chris, the owner of McNally, before we were talking, and he's like, it felt kind of nonfiction. I'm like, yeah, it's true. It was just me, you know, making up a character so I can rant about something, which is all of what novelists are. That's the secret of what we do, right? So it was kind of exploring that idea of art, and what does art do? And why do we do this? And how do we, like, and in one part, it's very healing because we're doing something productive. We're moving. We're almost taking all of these emotions and pulling it into something. I'm taking all my rants and I'm kind of putting them all together and trying to match up little puzzle pieces and see how they fit together. I think here in particularly with, like, I'll use like Lynn's example, like Lynn of making the vessels, she's exploring herself, she's creating herself over and over again. This is what we're doing. We are vessels, we are filled with water. We are, like, you know, each of us different, and each of our days are different from one another. You know, she's constantly recreating and doing and moving and improving and editing and, you know, as she's trying to figure out her life and spiraling through her childhood stuff, as we all do, especially when we're doing art, I think. You know, she's fixing you know, she's doing something with it. And I think that's always the brilliant thing about art for the artist, is that we're doing something with everything. It doesn't go away, it doesn't get better, it doesn't replace therapy, FYI, but it's doing something with it, which is nice.
To understand how she makes her plots, did you learn how to make plots?
I tried. I have a brilliant friend who it was the inspiration of Lynn's art practice, Casey Adams. I don't know if she's here. She was talking about being here. I don't think she's here. No,
She and David Robertson are.
she and David Robertson, like, fuck those guys. No, but she is a potter and does very similar things and explores the history and does exactly that. She does the pots in a bold way, and she has taught me many times to make pots. I'm very bad. I have no patience for things. We've talked about this already. Like I lose patience. It requires a lot of, as you know, as I explore in the book, for many times it's a lot of motion. You know, there's a lot of evening out going on. There's a lot of chafing in pots. Like I thought it was like, you know, Ghost. Yeah, I was gonna be Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze was just gonna come along. That did not happen. But yeah, it's hard. So I have a few pots that I've made, but only because Casey fixed them.
But I love how when Lynn is making her pots, she feels so connected to her ancestors, and that's a really beautiful thing. I think that the art that the Métis practice is a connection to ancestors. And weren't you beading or embroidering something to honor?
Oh, the honoring mothers. Yeah, I did. I tried beading, also bad at that.
Me too. So bad.
So bad. So bad. These things, you know, we're very bad Michif people. But I started embroidering, which I'm less bad at. So it's this beautiful project that Tracy Fair.
Tracy Charette Fair.
Started. It's ongoing starting this weekend, Saturday.
The Winnipeg Art Gallery.
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
so she's inviting Michif folks to come, and we're making squares in the names of our grandmothers and and aunties and ancestors. So I made one for my grandmother, who's passed, my auntie, who's still hanging out with me, and then we picked out some names from the hat. Right?
Nice.
So I'm gonna do a couple of those over, and we're going to. It's big now. We're making a video. Did you hear about this? We're making a video. I'm doing some poetry workshops with everyone, so we're gonna talk.
Great.
Yeah, it's gonna be a brilliant project, and it's going to be Louis Riel weekend at the art gallery, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That was
the name.
That was a digression.
Oh, okay.
And that was my fault,
Okay.
because I just wondered if you were a good beater. But the sisters have a bit of a falling out, but ultimately they come together again. But I think what they realize is their upbringings are completely different, right? That one gets to, or one does spend time with Renee, the other spends time with the dad, with Jerome. And yet, you know, they're tight. They have a beautiful relationship. What did you want to look at in there, besides the parts of you?
The parts of me just constantly arguing with one another. It was also me and my brother. Me and my sister. I don't have biological sisters, but I have like soul sisters and ceremony sister and lots of sisters. I think so much of this, what I really wanted to explore in craft is what we do in dialogue. You know, so much of relationship happens in just these nattering back and forths that we have. That's these seemingly innocuous, just like the vessel. It's this very like mundane thing that's actually really magical. But in these little conversations we hold so much knowledge about one another. And that's what Lynn and June are constantly doing throughout the novel. They're doing this back and forth, which sometimes leads to them nattering too much on each other and fighting, which happen when crisis happens and everybody has a lot of pressures, right? But it's really just in that constant conversation. And those are my favorite relationships where we're just, you know, it's a lifetime conversation, you know, it just seems to be paused every now and then, right?
That's beautiful. We have 15 minutes.
Oh gosh, we meant to have more time.
Yeah. I don't know if we can
We can go.
do it. John.
You can do it, Jim.
Don't you love that voice? And I mean, I always think it's the voice of the creator and where did it come from? But if you have questions, as Kate said, you can ask anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know, obviously I don't know who's read the book. And he had, oh yeah, if you have questions.
There
but
were
even
a
if
couple
you haven't, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, she read the book, she's just
I
bragging.
can ask you, what did you think? You loved it, that's great. Are there any questions for Kate? Yeah, thank you for being, it's always hard to be the first.
It's hard to be the first.
The two sisters, June and Lynn, do you relate more to June than to Lynn, or are you a combination of the two?
I'm a combination of, yeah, I'm always I'm a combination of the two. It depends on the day, depends on the mood, depends on like whatever is happening. Yeah, it depends on the mood. I'm very shifty that way. I always like to find as many characters as I create, I always find I relate to all of them in some way. I feel like that's a function that has to happen when you write about people and, you know, make believe people in your head. So I relate to Grandma Jeannie a lot. I find her really aspirational. I relate to Renee too, in a lot of ways. Sad, like, you know, those sad parts of me, I think. Well, maybe they're hilarious, I don't know.
Unfinished, maybe?
Unfinished, immature, you know? The dangerous parts. I always think my characters are like, things they're kind of at a place in my life where I could have made a different decision. So like in this way, June is a professor, and I would if I had my shit together, I tell you, I would have been a professor. I didn't. Lynn is kind of more like the artist. Like she's a little closer to me in a lot of ways. In the audiobook, I play Lynn.
Yeah. Tell us about the audio.
Oh, I wanted to. Oh, I'm so excited about the audiobook because I got to play Lynn, and Almaya Tailfeathers plays June, and Tracy Niepanak plays Grandma Jeannie.
Yeah, so great.
Oh, so good. And I'm so fangirling. I haven't met her, but Sheila McCarthy plays Renee and Auntie Dell.
Fantastic.
Mic drop. Sheila McCarthy.
She's awesome.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think she's the only one and this is a total unpopular opinion maybe, but she was the one in the Women Talking.
Yes. Oh, she was
She
amazing.
freaking nailed the
She
accent,
did.
and that's why I said her.
Yeah, wow.
She nailed that accent. I loved it.
Is there a guy in the audiobook for the guy?
I think they said like they used some random guy for all the random male voices. I'm sure he has a name.
Okay.
But they did something really interesting with the conversations because they were doing, they scripted some of the more scripty parts. So particularly the phone conversations, but then the other conversations that happened in person, that was just the one voice. So that last, for those of you who read the book, there's like this penultimate scene at the end of the book where they all smoke a bunch of weed and just deal with their shit. And Almaya Tailfeathers does that whole thing and just kind of jumps between the voices.
Wow.
And it's hilarious because she changes for the voices. She's excellent.
There's a journalist. I've got you in my sights, don't worry, but the journalist, made me hate journalists.
Darn those journalists.
Darn those
Fuck
journalists.
those guys.
What a bunch of vultures. And I say that as a vulture, but so well wrought, you know. We have evidence that da, 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 da,
Yeah.
you must be there for da, 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 the same as your mom, da, 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 you know.
Yeah.
And even though you know you are Michif, that you are Métis, Lynn and June, you're still questioning yourself. It just throws you off everything.
Well, I don't know, and I'm not, like, I know journalists like that, and they're just doing their jobs, but it's kind of this tactic, right? I'm not naming any names on that either. But it's like that, go for the jugular, see how people react, right? It's a tactic like anything else. But yeah, it's that, I don't know about you, but as soon as anyone says anything to me, I don't know if this is my childhood, whatever, but it's all, my automatic is like, yes, of course I'm wrong. Yes, of course I did something wrong. And then I move from there, you know, and then usually I end up getting mad or whatever process, you know, but it's always this immediate, like, yes, I must make this right. I am powerful. I can fix the situation. But yeah, when people come at you like that, my automatic response is like, what can I do to make it better for you?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Oh
I
my
don't know
God.
why. Yeah, you want to fix, you want to make nice, right? Oh, fuck that. Fuck that.
We don't want to go down that road.
We started this last year.
Oh
We
my.
did it.
The Ottawa Writers Festival. I was just released from the CBC, and I realized I could swear and not get fired.
So then she did the event with me and Cherie Demeline and Alicia Elliott.
Yeah.
So we just took that and ran with it.
Did they ever?
I think we even got Neil swearing at the
We
end.
did.
We
Yes,
did.
we did. It was
The guy who runs
well
Ottawa
done.
Writers
Yeah.
Festivals. Yeah, we were just giving her.
There you are. Hi. Oh, John. Yep. Don't trip.
Thank you. So I haven't read the book. I'm curious to know about the title, Real Ones. Like, could you just share maybe where that, why you chose that title?
It kind of became kind of a theme. It came out really naturally, actually, toward the end of the process. Because originally I was playing with this idea about like the people who own themselves. I was kind of owning, like trying to play with that in some way, like ownership, and it wasn't working. As many things didn't. But it became about this idea of real, like what's real, and part of the idea is like, one, they're real ones as opposed to not real, not the real Indigenous folks, but also it's them being real. There's a conversation they have about like that toward the end of the book, like where they're like talking about how they're messy and they're unsure and they're awkward and they're like, but we're real. It's kind of taking all of those parts that make us unsure, and those are what make us real, in addition to also being this play on, actual Indigenous folk kind of thing. So it became that one, and there's another section in the book called Good Ones. So there's good ones and real ones and these like, kind of labels in a way. I don't know. That's a perfect
First question.
it's a great question, but it's also, I think it's an undergrad paper. That sounds like an undergrad paper to me.
Yeah.
Not mine, I don't do that.
Yes. Oh, John got a bit of a run.
Look at this.
And he strides.
Oh, gallantly, like a gazelle.
Thank you for the microphone and running all the way over here. Just a quick comment, and I know we're supposed to stay to questions, but you're totally gonna be everybody's grandmother. No worries if your kids don't have any. Like seriously, people are gonna adopt you.
Awesome.
What I wanted to ask you is about the whole call-out culture around pretendians. It seems to me, and I can't verify this, but a lot of the call-outs are from non-Indigenous people or non-Indigenous organizations. And I'm wondering what's your view or what's your perspective on that call-out culture?
And I think you're right. I think oftentimes this becomes a conversation that gets taken away from Indigenous folks, which is why I really wanted to concentrate this on affect and what happens to us. It's not about what they're doing and, oh, this horrible person and, damn them and all of that. But it's like, this has an effect on us, that this creates more emotional labor for us. That's what I want to talk about. But I think you're right. I think it does kind of come out outside of the Indigenous community. And what I always recognize is that it becomes this conversation that is taken away from the Indigenous community. It becomes all about, you know, these folks that are not in community and don't understand basic definitions, and we have to, like, you know, everyone's confused. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so confused, and then we have to, you know, cater to the confusion and explain things rather than, and we're leaving out the actual, what I think are the bigger questions, which is what this does to Indigenous culture exposure, the space that it takes up, which I think is the biggest violence that happens. But, and I don't know, and this is an incomplete thought that I'm in the process of really, like, there's something about calling out that is also inherently violent. As much as I think that folks should always be honest, and if someone is committing atrocities, they need to be accountable for those. But there's so much in that I think there's opportunities in that could be done better. You know, so if it's a non-Indigenous organization, maybe that calling out doesn't have to necessarily be a calling out, but that power needs to be given to somebody else so often. And I think that as much as we rage in the world about these things like this and many, many other injustices that should be accounted for. I think we kind of get lost in calling out and picking is the wrong word, but pointing at people and their actions rather than the bigger issue. It's a very vague comment on a very big issue. Thank you.
John, there's a question over here. While you're running, and actually this is probably too big a question. I'll hold it.
Okay. I'll hold it.
Hi, thanks. I come from India and I came over when I was about 5. And at that time it was all about assimilating right into the Canadian culture. And my culture was seen as a very foreign thing and from a country that was colonized by the British, right? And a lot of things were taken, part of that being culture. And now I see that culture is embraced by many people. We talked about yoga. And I always wonder about the line between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. And I always struggle with that and wonder, is it for me to call it or who is gonna call it out? But I agree with you about identity and just how that it's a real struggle. And I just wonder if you could speak to that.
I can try to speak to that. I mean, I think there's really, you say yoga, and I do think there's amazing conversations happening in BIPOC and marginalized yoga communities right now around this exact thing, like what is the appropriation of yoga, versus what is the appreciation of yoga, and what is, you know, genuine, authentic yoga as opposed to whatever else we see. And it's a really neat, like there's a lot of like if we're talking about calling out, there's a lot of calling in that. And a lot of inclusion of South Asian and you know, actual folks and practitioners of yoga who understand what they're talking about and the philosophy that is behind all of that, and that it's not just this exercise for skinny bodies. And I'm really fascinated by that. And I'm a very keen, eager student of all of that. So I think it's something I always think it's about, I don't know where the line is, but I mean, my guess is somewhere around the line of who profits, you know, what the profit is, what's the, you know, the end goal, what's a genuine, you know, in the Indigenous communities, we always talk about the community you claim and that claims you. So what is the community claim buy-in? You know, what community is this person a part of, or are they separate and just like a consumer of this? And that is a big thing in yoga, because so often these are folks that have that is something really big in yoga, because so often these people have no knowledges. These people are like yoga instructors, and all the popular ones have no knowledge in what's actually the actual history and philosophies and the science behind everything, which is again a loss, because there's so many brilliant opportunities to share these knowledges and to be wonderful allies rather than appropriating for, you know, whatever yoga is supposed to do, make us skinny and really pale or something, I don't know. But yeah, there's, yeah, I think about, I always think it's a relationship around power you know, who has the power versus who has the power taken from them, something like that.
Thank you for that. We're out of time. I'm so sorry, but you could buy a book and slip it in Weston. There you go. Awesome. All right. Just to close off, would you read, there's a really beautiful passage about stories and you named some really great Michif women.
Oh, for sure. I gotta get
Okay, it's page 178.
Okay, I'll read your book, but
Okay.
I won't jumble it, I swear.
Starting with Inez.
Oh, it's all warm. Just cuddling. So this is June's voice, and yeah, it's really just her you know, she's moving. There's no real preamble reading. After I drive Grandma home, I dig into my class notes. She's the professor. In my new office, surrounded by my unpacked boxes, I managed to get the big comfy chair under the east window. It's a great spot. I can see the sun and orange out in the west. The last of the elms and the airport just over my laptop screen. I nestle into my stories of my ancestors, women's stories as awesome and everyday as the sunset. Buffalo hunters, sharpshooters, the many who melted down metal to make bullets during the Northwest resistance. Annie Bannatyne, who horsewhipped the naughty Charles Marr in the street on shopping day, humiliated the uppity asshole and inspired a revolution. Sarah Balladine, Michif wife of the chief factor. She was mistrusted by the newly arriving British women who didn't want to answer up to someone they thought was below them. So they started a rumor that young, beautiful Sarah was cheating on her husband. Reputational warfare. It took a sensational court case for libel, filed by the man she was rumored to be cheating with, to stop the lies. And though the case was won, Mrs. Balladine, social standing was never the same. White folks trying to destroy Michif women, not overtly, not violently, at least not physically, but with whispers, rumors, and side eye. Gossip is a nasty seed, seemingly not sinister, just a question, tiny pieces of sand so small, but where and where until they make holes. The only real way to avoid it is to not participate at all. Not exactly an option for Michif women of that day. Not really an option for any of us, not all the way. Even if we don't go online, we're still in it. Each one of us is made of stories, only as good as the ones people remember.
Isn't that a great one? Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you both so very much. We have reached the signing portion of the evening, so I will humbly ask you all to remain in place while my colleague escorts Katherena safely over to the signing table beside the cash desk, and then we can have you all descend when she's actually ready to go. In the interim, you will be entertained by me describing signing procedure to you.
Oh, okay.
So we do have a number of copies of real ones over there at the cash desk as well. I'll also be running up and down the line. I'll be walking up and down with some Post-it notes. It's the sound of a hug. I'll be walking up and down the line with some Post-it notes, which is not because we don't trust you to spell your name when you get to the signing table. It just ensures you can spend a little bit more time chatting rather than signing. And in a context like this, where you have people descending from every possible aspect of your world, it can be a little bit difficult to even remember the name of your best friend. So it's a nice memory aid as you get up there. Thank you all so very much for joining us here this evening. You can get a copy of the book signed before you pay for it. Just please do remember to visit the cash desk. If you've hit the parking lot, you've gone too far. We're so very grateful to Hamish Hamilton as well for publishing this book, for making this evening a possibility. We are, of course, enormously grateful to Shelagh Rogers for hosting the event. And because she can still hear you, please give Katherena Vermette an enormous round of applause.